Ms. Goodridge, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here. I guess a little bit to follow up on some of the questions that have come so far. I know back in, I think it was April or March of 2024, Prince George came out saying that you guys had found safe supply pills in your region. I was wondering, how can you confidently say that drugs that were seized in Prince George were in fact government, taxpayer-funded, safe supply drugs?
Yeah, I believe with regards to that initial media release, it was our belief because they were similar to and believed to be from safe supply or prescribed supply. However, we conducted further investigations and made observations that determined that safer supply was indeed being diverted into the illicit market.
Thank you. So it's not something that you guys just went out and decided that because it looked like these drugs that they were, you actually did a series of investigations on this? Correct.
And we had received complaints of diversion prior to that as well.
So I want to go back a little bit. What did you see in the aftermath of British Columbia's disastrous move towards the legalization of hard drugs in your community of Prince George?
I would say the most significant impact was a noticeable increase in crimes of disorder, or not crimes of disorder necessarily, but public disorder, particularly in the downtown core, but in other areas of the city. So it really reduced the livability of the community for many people who experienced an environment of increased public drug use, particularly from individuals perhaps with their children that no longer wanted to shop at particular stores because there were persons openly smoking drugs on the sidewalk nearby.
I know as a mom of young kids, I had many moms reaching out to me, sharing the stories that they had about children's playgrounds being littered with drug paraphernalia, people using drugs in public parks and playgrounds, disrupting their paths of travel. How did the community of Prince George specifically react to the disastrous legalization project?
I would say it's very similar. We received quite a number of complaints. I received complaints personally on a daily basis from business leaders and members of the community with regards to those issues.
So at the same time that you saw this massive policy shift moving towards making it legal for people to be able to possess and use up to 2.5 grams of fentanyl, crack, cocaine, and a number of other drugs, did you see any increases into your community for treatment and recovery supports?
No, I did not.
Okay. That seems like a bit of a struggle, because if you're going to make a massive policy change, remove tools from law enforcement, and then in turn not provide any supports on the other side, did this normalize drug use in the community?
I would say that's a fair characterization that, open drug use was certainly normalized. There were issues prior to that, but it certainly made it commonplace.
Thank you. So I'm just going to move really quickly over to Mr. Rolfe. I'm just wondering, how many lives have been saved in your housing programs with the use of evidence-based opiate agonist therapy medications like methadone or Suboxone?
It's actually a difficult number to actually track. It's more along the lines of who is actually using Suboxone. And really it comes down to the availability of the prescribers coming into the program, the availability of primary care.
So you guys aren't able to track which one of your people that are living in your facilities are using these opiate agonist therapies?
Yeah, we can. It would be possible to come up with a number of people who are on Suboxone, yes.
Okay. How important is it to have access to qualified addiction specializing prescribers so that people that are looking for those off-ramps can actually get that treatment?
It's critical. I think as I said in my remarks, I think supportive housing is key in that it creates a place of stability where treatment can actually begin. People have an address, which means that they can actually get linked to primary care, which means they can get referrals to where they need to go.
Thank you, Mr. Rolfe. Thank you, Ms. Goodrich. Next, Dr. Moore, please, for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And my question is going to be to Mr. Wright. As a retired RCMP superintendent, 28 years on the front line of policing, you've seen the impact of changes that have been made by federal governments over the years in your community. You've been on the front line, and I found your testimony very instructive and persuasive. You've been on the front line, so you see these changes in real time. We also have the benefit of Statistics Canada that tracks crime statistics, amongst other things. And in the last 9 years, we know that violent crime is up 50% in Canada. Homicides are up 28%. Sexual assaults are up 75%. Auto theft is up 46%. Violent firearms offenses are up 116%. Those are Statistics Canada numbers. Some of this is a direct result of changes that have been made, for example, with bail, the catch and release bail in Bill C-75, where we see those that probably should be in custody after committing offense or out on the street reoffending. How have you seen catch and release impact the ability of police to disrupt the illicit drug trade in British Columbia?
Thank you for the question. With regards to how it impacts the illicit drug trade, I would say that the most significant manner is persons charged with violent offenses are often now released on bail, whereas my experience 10, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. And while they're out on bail, they then reoffend and continue to commit further violent crime. And much of our violent crime, at least in the community where I worked, was directly related to the illicit drug trade.
Okay. And I noticed in your remarks you used the term, and I've heard it used before at this committee, of so-called safe supply. That's because of the interplay between so-called safe supply and the illicit drug trade. We heard from a previous witness about individuals selling their safe supply in order to get harder drugs, and that safe supply getting into our schools, getting to students. What's your experience with that? Is that accurate as to what's happening in your experience?
Well, it's my experience that a quantity of that prescribed supply is making its way out into the community, into the illicit market, and unfortunately, as it comes packaged as a prescribed pharmaceutical, I believe it gives the impression that it's safer than a street drug, but it's still an opioid, and I think it could have, or does have, disastrous effects for some individuals, particularly those experimenting.
You had said in an interview about the failed, I think we should all agree that it's been a failed policy of drug decriminalization led to a proliferation of open drug trafficking in the downtown core, much more than you had seen previously. What do you see as the long-term impacts of an entire year where decriminalization was in effect, and how it normalized otherwise illicit drug trade?
Yeah, basically that the open drug use, drug trafficking, and incidents of disorder in the community still exist. It's very hard to put that genie back in the bottle because that mindset has shifted to become a norm amongst many people there. So it's definitely an uphill battle to try and roll that clock back.
Okay. I still have some time, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Moore?
You would know that just last week, and I'm sure there's some former colleagues of yours, we saw the RCMP in British Columbia dismantle the largest and most sophisticated super lab in Canada. Police seized 54 kilograms of fentanyl and 390 kilograms of meth from this lab, not to mention 89 guns, some of which were loaded and ready to use. You'll know that under this government's Bill C-5, it allowed for house arrest for those that are producing, importing, and exporting Schedule 1 drugs, which previously that would have required, if someone was convicted, would have required a jail sentence. Now, someone convicted in this case could indeed serve their sentence from home. What message do you think that sends to the community about those that are involved in this very harmful activity?
Yeah, I think it definitely lessens the deterrence of a sentence if that's how it rolls out. In particular, electronic monitoring and the expansion of it here recently over the last several years has been problematic, as many individuals, even on electronic monitoring, continue to commit many offenses in the community, including very serious violent offenses.
Okay.
Thank you. Please, for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I'll add my voice to thanking the witnesses for being here. One of the things we haven't talked much about, Mr. Wright, really is related to drugs coming into this country or drugs being manufactured here. We certainly have heard recently about the massive drug bust that has happened, the guns and other quantities of cash, et cetera, that were seized at the same time. Obviously, you know, part of your jurisdiction is some parts of BC. And can you tell the committee a little bit about, perhaps, if you have had experience around drugs coming into this country, precursor drugs perhaps, and also a little bit around are these illicit drugs being made here in Canada?
Yes, thanks for the question. I don't have a particular amount of experience with regards to the transnational, international nature of it. However, over several years, really when the fentanyl crisis started, the majority was being imported. It's now my understanding that much of it is actually being manufactured in Canada as a source country now. And I would say a lot of that has to do with what is my understanding of fairly lax controls with around precursor chemicals in this country as opposed to some other countries such as the United States.
Or perhaps even the UK, which makes those precursor substances illegal until they are made legal. Is that not the case?
I don't have knowledge of that, but I would agree with that, yes.
Thanks very much.